I'm getting ready for my next CGC pre-screen submission, but I need your help. Hey there, today I'm putting together my next CGC pre-screen submission, and I'm trying to narrow down the number of books to 25. In my first pre-screen submission, I sent 29 books. I don't know why, but I did anyway. I just probably couldn't figure out which 25 to send, so I figured why not send 29? But what ended up happening is CGC split my order up so that I had a 25 screen proper submission and then 4 extra books that they separated out and actually sent separately and charged me an additional shipping cost. So I want to only send 25 this time, now that I know if you send more than 25, this is what happens. They start splitting it up. But I can't decide which 25 to send. I've put together 30 books that I think are eligible for a pre-screen, and I'm going to go through the books and show you the 30. And then what I would ask, if you don't mind, is to provide some feedback, leave a comment on this video as far as any books that you would eliminate from this order. Now, I love a good sarcastic remark, so if you want to say I wouldn't send any of these in, that's perfectly fine. But if there are some that you spot during this video where you're like, that doesn't make good economic sense, or it's just a bad book, or there's no way that book is going to get a 9.8, just leave me a comment, let me know, because I could use your help to just kind of narrow this down to 25. And as far as the conditions of the books are concerned, I'll point out which books I don't think are absolute 9.8s. For the most part, the majority of the comics in this stack I do believe are 9.8s, but there's a handful of, I guess I would say, books that I really, really hope are 9.8s, or I really just want them to be for my personal collection. I mean, if you're sending books into CGC, of course you want all of them to be 9.8s, but there are some that I ended up grading myself, and I gave them a 9.6, but I think I was not exactly certain if they deserved the 9.6, if it was a manufacturing defect, or if it was something that had a little bit of spine splitting near the corner that, you know, with a cardstock that might just be something that CGC would allow and so forth. So my thought process is I didn't want to necessarily get them in 9.6 because they're very valuable raw. And that is something that I'm starting to look at in my analysis, is comparing like Modern's high-end incentives raw versus 9.6, 9.4, obviously 9.8, and looking at, you know, when it makes sense to actually send a book in. There's one book in particular in this order that has reported value in a CGC 9.8, but nothing below, but still from a raw book perspective is super, super valuable. So that's where I'm trying to figure out, like, this is the kind of book that even if I think is borderline 9.8, or I think it's 9.6, or I might be a little too harsh, I want to include it in a pre-screen submission like this, because if CGC kicks it back, I'd rather keep it raw or part with it raw. Because with these new books, if they're brand new Moderns released within the last 12 months, and they're coming back 9.4, 9.6, I feel like it almost hurts the value of the comic, even though you would think, well, it's already been slabbed and graded and cataloged and so forth. So if you're just buying it to own it, why wouldn't you take something of a lesser grade? I guess the argument could be made for any comic book like that, but these higher end incentives and things like that, sometimes it's just about acquiring the book. And as much as we want it in high grade, does it always matter, right? And that's kind of what I'm just mulling over and thinking about. So here's the plan. Let me show you the stack of 30 books. Hopefully most of them are self-explanatory. It's a good mixture of incentives, books with a lot of value, independent, great covers, and then just, I think, random books that I also like as part of my personal collection that I would like to get slabbed. So it isn't kind of an interesting mix. But if you stay to the end, what I've done is I've come up with yet another spreadsheet view, but this one shows me these 30 books as a complete set of books that I'm considering sending in for the pre-screen. And then hopefully by looking at this data, you can kind of help me pare down this stack of 30 books to 25 by looking at things like raw value and graded value or lack of graded value. So let's go ahead and take a look at the books. And again, please keep in mind, which 5 books would you pull out of this submission to make it a proper 25 book CGC 9.8 pre-screen. All right, let's get to it. Here are the books. Batgirl 31. This is the In-hyuk Lee variant cover. Batgirl 35. Batman 98. This is the Jimenez 1 in 25 incentive. Batman 118. This is the homage cover to Spider-Man 1. Again, trying to collect these covers slabbed in a 9.8. Batman Annual number 25. Great black and red cover by Jock. Grimm number 1. This is the foil variant. 2 copies of Something is Killing the Children number 1. This is the 8th print. Spawn number 141. Death of Doctor Strange Bloodstone number 1 with cover art by David Nakayama. Catwoman 43, the Sozumika incentive variant. Catwoman number 40, the Sozumika 1 in 25 incentive variant. And Catwoman 42, the Sozumika 1 in 25 incentive variant. Now, these 3 are examples of books that I personally graded 9.6. They all have kind of the same flaw, which is there's just some sort of little, the tiniest bit right there on the corner of certainly a color break, a color tear, I don't know what you call it, but pristine otherwise. So spine is gorgeous and it's nice because it is protected by that thick cardstock, but I don't know at what point does something like that tiniest little corner issue become a problem where CGC says, nope, 9.6, even though the rest of the book is fantastic. So all 3 of these, I personally rated 9.6. So I'm going to include these, or unless you say don't, I'm going to include them in my 9.8 pre-screen. And then if they get bounced back, then I know for sure on cardstocks, that's a problem. Same thing for the next 2 books. This is Sandman Universe Nightmare Country, the Jenny Frison 1 in 100 variant. And I have 2 copies. And again, same sort of problem where I'm looking to see if it's the top or the bottom corner, but same sort of thing where it's just a little bit of whitening there at the bottom corner, but I'm really, really looking for at least one of these in a 9.8. Warlock and the Infinity Watch number 2. I unboxed this not too long ago and realized it was a newsstand edition, and this particular book in newsstand has some value in a 9.8. Mandalorian number 1, the action figure variant. I love these when I'm able to get them slabbed and hung up on the wall because it does actually fool people and it makes them think that it is an action figure. X-Men number 1, the Dodderman 1 in 25 incentive variant. This one I graded as a 9.6, but I'd love to get as many of these covers slabbed in a 9.8 where he does sort of every iteration of a character's costume. Dr. Aphra number 18. I love this Witter cover art with Aphra and Hera, with Hera confirmed for the upcoming Ahsoka show. Spider-Man number 6. I'm trying to include as many of these as I can. I love getting these for a few bucks, finding them in a 9.8 and sending those in. Great McFarlane cover. Okay, the last 10. Here we go. Something is Killing the Children number 3 and Something is Killing the Children number 2. I gave number 3 a 9.8. Number 2, I gave a 9.6. I believe it has possibly a minor non-color breaking spine tick, and so I possibly overgraded this one in a 9.6, but really, really tough red cover there. Now I have a run of Department of Truth books. This is a series that I love. I mean, there's so many great covers, almost too many, but this was one of the very first covers that I fell in love with. This is issue 1, the In-hyuk Lee 1 in 25. This I gave a 9.6 to. This is the Virgin variant, I believe from Sanctum Sanctorum. It's the grayscale Jenny Frison of issue number 1. And I think it's limited to 1,000. I'm not sure, but I think it's a ghost. It's not a ghost. This is Department of Truth number 3. This was just an open order variant by Sorrentino, and I want to send this one in because of the all black cover. I gave it a 9.8. Department of Truth number 2, this is a 1 in 10. The Francisco Francavilla variant cover. Big fan of his, so I'd love to have this one graded in a 9.8. And then Department of Truth kind of started running wild with their variants and store exclusives. This is Department of Truth number 10. This is the Natalie Sanders variant. And the last Department of Truth book, this is another store exclusive, homage to House of Secrets. And then the last two books are a little bit older, a couple of 80s books. This is Wonder Woman 83, great Brian Bolland cover. And lastly, Sensational She-Hulk number 2 with fantastic John Byrne cover art. All right, those are the 30 books. Before you start hitting me up with comments and sharing your opinions about which books I should send in and which ones I should cut out, let me show you the data so you can kind of see why some of these books were selected, and then you can use that data to make your final cuts. Okay, so here is that data. What you can do with Microsoft Excel or Google Sheets is you can create filters. And so sometimes it makes sense for me to create a separate spreadsheet, and maybe I'm pulling in data using sort of an external data source that might be another workbook of mine, or I may create a new sheet that is kind of a filtered or watered down version of the data that allows me to then further manipulate that data or aggregate on it without affecting the source. And then in this case, you can create a data filter view right there on the data itself. So you don't need to see my face for this. I'd rather you see the numbers and the data here. So this is that spreadsheet. It is my comic book collection ledger, just filtered down where I've indicated that the book is a potential pre-screen candidate. So I won't go line by line, but I want to point out some of the reasons why I picked out books. And honestly, one of the biggest things that jumps out is anything in column V, which this is the CGC value of this book, where column S is the grade that I have assigned the book. So I've done a pre-screen of myself already on the book, like I do with any comic book that I order and add to my collection. I personally assign a grade to it. And you'll see most of these are 9.8, with some of them being 9.6s. So for those 9.8s, it's really easy to look in column V to find books that are over $100. So Something is Killing the Children, number 3, not the greatest cover, but 177 in a 9.8. Department of Truth, that great Jenny Frison grayscale cover, also I have pre-screened at a 9.8 at 173. Star Wars Dr. Aphra number 18, a very surprising 155 for that great Ashley Witter cover with Aphra and Hera on the cover. Wonder Woman 83 with Brian Bolland cover art, 170. And Catwoman 43, a 9.6 is 150, which then you would say, why not save that for a 9.6 pre-screen? And that would make some sense, but those Sousa Micah Catwoman covers, I only have one of each of those, and really would rather have them in a 9.8 or raw. Moving down just to the last couple here, Spawn 141, currently as it sits, the most valuable, or I should say the book with the most potential value if it were to come back in a 9.8, $242 for that book, and then that Batman Annual 25 at $149. Now, many of these have zeros in their CGC value, and it's either because these books don't have values in 9.6 or even 9.8. They're just too new. There's just not enough data. But here, for example, those two great Frison 1 in 100 Nightmare Country books, the raw fair market value for those as provided by Cover Price is $311. So I would personally just rather have them raw unless I can get them in a 9.8. Now, the last thing that I'll point out as you kind of comb over this data, and some of these, I'll be honest, this is where the data really makes me question whether or not it's worth it, where I'm trying to decide if it makes good financial sense to send these books in with a 9.8 pre-screen and only do that if it makes financial sense, or will I allow myself to just want to have a particular book in a 9.8, even if it's not valuable, because I want to have it in that CGC case to be able to display, or I feel like it has long-term potential investment value. And that's where some of the decision making gets a little tricky, and this is where I could certainly use your help and I would value your input. So going top to bottom here and looking at some of these 9.8 values, like that 1 in 10 Francisco Francavilla of Department of Truth number 2, CGC value is only $30. Here's Department of Truth number 10, the homage cover to House of Secrets, only $39. And also, if you're playing at home and looking at the column just next to the CGC value, you can see my total cost. So $17.31 purchase just to pick up that book raw, for it to only then be worth $39 in a 9.8. Again, it could be just kind of a wash in terms of value. So I have to find other reasons why it would make sense to send it in. Here's another one, Batgirl 35, $32 in a 9.8. And then another interesting one, Something is Killing the Children, number 1, the 8th print. Those, I have 2 copies of those, only $34 if slabbed in a 9.8. Those only cost me $6 to pick up. But again, after the book is graded, after the fees, really not much additional value there that I've added. And then the last thing I'll point out, and to me it's part of the fun, as far as like, where did I get the book from? Where did I originally acquire the book? In column B here are all the different online stores where I picked up these books, and you'll see it's from a variety, and that's what I do. I like to buy from a variety of stores. I like to track, and it'll be interesting to see over time which stores I actually get slabbed 9.8s back from. But without naming every single store, it's just a nice mix of back issue, specialty stores, online stores that are kind of like Shopify based, where they offer store exclusives. And there are other Shopify based stores where you can purchase brand new books and do FOC ordering. So places like Things from Another World and Dark Dominion Comics, those are places where I do my new book ordering. So I've got some in there as well. A few from Atomic Avenue and Midtown Comics and so forth. So enough staring at a spreadsheet. Now you could stare at me, but this is where I could use your help. So you've seen the data, you've seen the books, you've seen which ones are 9.6, which ones are 9.8, and I want to send 25 of these in a 9.8 pre-screen. So if you just want to say only send the ones you think are 9.8s, forget the 9.6s, okay, I get that. Maybe reserve the 9.6s for a 9.6 pre-screen, that makes sense. Maybe some of the books that don't have any value at all, kind of hold those back. But I'd love to get your feedback on this approach. I'm not going to be sending any of the rejects in with this order, because what I would prefer to do is give each of the rejects from my last pre-screen either a quick press or just designate them as 9.6 and move on, because I thought they were 9.8. And since they didn't pass the pre-screen, maybe I see a defect that would keep them at a 9.6, but I'm not going to include rejects in this one. It's going to be a brand new set of books to send in. So let me know what you think. Which 5 books would you cut out of this pre-screen submission? You can leave a comment below, or you can message me on social media at Moneyball Comics. Thanks for watching, happy collecting, and see you next time.